All right, everyone say, you're thinking it. Aww. Isn't that beautiful? Exactly. Would you like to howl? Are you feeling howly this morning? Excellent. I love it. So as I was thinking of what to bring for the Time for All Ages this morning, I remembered a short story poem by the Sufi poet Rumi that has always made me scratch my head. And I thought, well, that's a good thing to bring, because then I can't just explain it all away because, I don't know. But it has to do with connection, and not just sort of when we've achieved connection and the warm fuzzies, but when we yearn for connection. And so this is entitled Love Dogs. And that's a noun with an adjective in front. It's not a verb with a noun following, okay? Okay, for all you frustrated English teachers out there, I got ya. One night, a man was crying, Allah, Allah. His lips grew sweet with the praising, until a cynic said, so I have heard you calling out, but have you ever gotten any response? The man had no answer to that. He quit praying, and he fell into a confused sleep. He dreamed he saw Qadir, the guide of souls, in a thick green foliage. Why did you stop praising? Because I've never heard anything back. This longing you express is the message. It is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. That whining is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be one of them. A little collective scratching of head. I think this is a difficult message for us to swallow. I mean, our longing is connection. And yet at the same time, the message is very sweet. So think about times when you have longed for that which is greater than you. And if that sounds mysterious, think about a time when you have longed for a sense of being seen. Anyone ever experienced the being in the crowd and completely alone? Yeah. Sometimes it's the loneliest place to be. And that longing, oh, if only I knew someone here, or if only someone would share with me and give me an opening to be part of this circle. That longing is the beginning of that connection. Maybe you've longed to be understood, but people just say, you're the weirdo in the family. Sorry, we don't understand you. You are bizarre. Wouldn't it be fun to be understood? And not in sort of that, aren't you a sweet thing kind of way, but really, really understood, like you belonged, like you weren't that proverbial square peg in a round hole. So think for a second about ways that you call out. Sometimes it's literally, like at the beginning of this story, with the man calling out, Allah, Allah. And sometimes we don't even have words to make any sort of sense of that longing, but we feel compelled maybe to weep, to moan, to sigh. That longing for connection is the doorway to something amazing and special if we're willing to walk through that doorway into that mysterious, vulnerable, what if they don't really understand me place? What if I'm not really understood? That vulnerability brings out our deepest fears. But connection, sometimes we're this close. We are so close to connecting. And we give up. Oh, no one understands me. I'll just go. There is nothing more than this minute that I can see, and there is so much more. There's so much mystery. I love this image of the two wire statues, I don't know what to call them, figures, who are facing away from each other in disconnection, and yet that inner self, that child inside, longing, being right there. I can almost reach it. Isn't that a strong image? And sometimes the connection we long for is something we can't even name. It just feels like an emptiness. And we have to trust that there's something to connect to, even if we can't see it. And even if it seems as fragile as a soap bubble. As you go through the week, I would like you to experiment with different ways of connecting. Connecting to people, connecting to yourself. Oh, I really should go out and take a walk today because it's gorgeous and that's about to end, but I think I'll dust the furniture instead because I should do that. Go outside. This is your prescription. Go outside. Connect with all of it. So this week, that's part of your task. If it's raining, take an umbrella. Maybe you dance or make music or paint or just go wandering or speak into the wind. Whoever's out there, thanks. This is a pretty awesome world. I'm grateful. Allah, Allah. Connect. And just try, even for a moment, to be a love dog. And you may howl. Let's not only howl, but let's sing our children and youth to their programming. And I end with the proposed 8th principle. We affirm and promote journeying toward wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I think that proposed 8th principle comes up for a vote to the General Assembly in 2 years. I think that's the process. So it's one you may not have memorized. Our principles function to call us in, to bring us together. Whether you have come to Unitarian Universalism from another faith tradition or were born here, it is likely that some aspect of the principles is what draws and keeps you here. So let's get a pulse of the room. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand for what principles really sing to you. You may respond to as many as you wish. No one is going to judge you for having favorites and not being jazzed about some of them. If everyone raises their hands for everything, well, it will be lovely to look at, but it won't really give us a sense for which of the principles really sing to you, okay? All right. Here we go. So raise your hand as things make you happy. Affirming and promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Very nice. If that were expanded to include every being, let's see what that looks like. Very nice, because that's also on the table with the General Assembly. And the General Assembly is us, the UUs across the planet. Affirming and promoting justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Okay, so what if that were expanded? This one's not on the table, but I might write to somebody important and ask them. If that were to include more than human relations, so beyond human relations, if that would make you a happy person, cool. Where am I? Affirming and promoting acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. Very nice. I hope you're looking around, not so you can be like, I thought you liked mine best. Affirming and promoting a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Very nice. You'll notice I'm just raising my hand for everything because I'm the minister and that's my job. Affirming and promoting the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. Affirming and promoting the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. As a footnote, how many of you see the Superman standing there with his cape when I read that one to you? I do. It's like billowing, liberty and justice for all. Okay. Affirming and promoting the goal of world community. Oh, I already did that one. Affirming and promoting respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Very nice. And the proposed eighth. Affirming and promoting journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Lovely. Thank you for playing along. Unitarian Universalism is an intentionally pluralistic way of doing religion. I'm just going to say that again. Unitarian Universalism is an intentionally pluralistic way of doing religion. Does it kind of freak you out when I use the R word? There is religion and there is spirituality, and although they are related, they are not synonymous. And I think, personally, that we've gone a little bit off the rails in sort of taking pride in the, well, I'm spiritual but not religious. I find that an interesting idea. Religion is not the enemy. Certain types or manifestations of religion may be toxic to us, that's true, but religion is simply structure. So for example, let's say you decided you wanted to put your creativity to work and you decided to build a house for yourself. If you don't start with some blueprints that factor in where the plumbing and the wiring go and some accommodation for the size and the levelness of the lot, it will just be a miracle if you build something that is functional and safe to live in. Religion functions in the same way. We need foundation and structure to have something coherent and healthy. Our principles provide that structure, the strong foundation upon which we can build a beloved community. Now, if you look carefully at our principles, you may notice that they contain a balance of freedom and responsibility. It can be really tempting to only look through the lens of our own longings, affirming our needs and desires. But each one of those principles starts with we affirm and promote. Yes, these are personal invitations to belong. That's the affirming part. And They are calls to action to create conditions of safety and belonging for others. That's the promoting part. We find freedom in the first principle that lifts up our inherent worth and dignity. And we are challenged to extend that to people who may embrace ideologies that we find confusing. Come and be free and do the work to understand others. Inevitably, when we talk about our first principle, the question comes up, well, what about Hitler? Huh? Or Charles Manson, or shooters who open fire on school children? Do they have inherent worth? Yes. I believe everyone is born with worth and dignity. What we do with that gift is another matter entirely. For those I've mentioned and the countless others who also break covenant with the good and with the rest of humanity, they sully and destroy that birthright with their actions. In the description for today's service, I wrote, we turn to the principles for our foundational beliefs, the values statements that guide our lives and identify us as Unitarian Universalists. Shared values and beliefs are key to a sense of belonging in a group. So I'm going to use this structure to help us go a little bit deeper. So I'm going to start with foundational beliefs. I noted earlier that Unitarian Universalism is an intentionally pluralistic way of doing religion. There is actually an awful lot to unpack in that sentence. First of all, a quick reminder that ours is a blended faith. In 1961, after many decades of debate and conversation, two liberal Protestant Christian traditions, Unitarianism and Universalism, merged to form something new. Both had been rejected by the World Council of Churches for not being Christian enough, although both were known for their work in social justice and in living into Jesus' example of caring for the most vulnerable. I find that ironic. The Unitarians brought to the merger an emphasis on free thought and humanism, while the Universalists brought a theology of hope, with all souls restored to a loving God. Both emphasized deeds, not creeds. Important what we do, not so much that we believe the same things. Our principles reflect both sides in the same way that they balance the needs and the longings of the individual and the collective. The newly formed Unitarian Universalism spent the first 25 years honing the statements that would become our principles and purposes. Have you ever wondered, why would we call them also our purposes? It just seems like an extra word. Let's just go with principles, okay? No. They are our purposes as well. I'm convinced that it reflects that inner and outer focus, affirming and promoting, individual and collective. These are principles that guide individual lives, and they provide the structure for us to live purposefully in the world, doing what we can to make things better for ourselves, as well as finding wholeness for ourselves, for others, for the all. Unitarian Universalism is an intentionally pluralistic way of doing religion. The seeds of that pluralism can be found in what each tradition brought to the merger, and they've expanded to be inclusive of other faith traditions and spiritual practices. But we'll talk more about the particulars of that next week when we dive into our sources. When I speak of UU as a way of doing religion, I am making a distinction between process and product. Unlike a religion, we do not demand orthodoxy. right belief, or truly even orthopraxy, right doing. We appreciate those things, but we do not require them as a means to attain salvation or enlightenment. Those are the usual products of religion. Rather, we have a process for meaning-making, trusting each individual to make discoveries and decisions about their own spirituality. The process is not one of indoctrination, but of covenant, joining together with the sacred promise to make the journey to wholeness with honesty and integrity. This also means that you can be part of another religion and still be a Unitarian Universalist. You may be a Christian who follows the example of Jesus, and you may be part of this community of kindred hearts, if not always like minds. The same applies if you are a Buddhist, a pagan, a humanist, agnostic, atheist, or any other religion, as long as it's based in love. You can belong in this community because the principles and purposes resonate with you and are in alignment with your personal beliefs, and you wish to live a principled life in beloved community with others who are also on the path to wholeness. So they're foundational. The principles are also values statements. They clearly outline that which is of ultimate importance to us: individual worth and dignity, justice, peace, acceptance, giving people a voice and a vote, respect for the web. These values statements create a sense of group belonging, common ideals and understandings. But these lofty statements are nothing but hot air if we don't internalize them, giving them hands and feet and a heart that is willing to risk. We need to let these values become the core of who we are, not just what we think. The principles and purposes help us to guide our lives by inviting us to stretch ourselves, to risk appearing foolish, to give ourselves to love, becoming love dogs that yearn for connection with the ultimate. If we let them, these guiding statements can change our lives and add meaning to our living. This weekend, we remember the life and impact of Norbert Čapek, the founder of the Unitarian congregation in Prague in the 1920s, who was arrested with his daughter by the Nazis, who accused them of treason for believing these things: truth above tradition, spirit above any scripture, freedom above authority, and progress above all reaction. On October 12, 1942, Čapek was sent to Hartheim Castle from Dachau concentration camp and was likely poisoned shortly thereafter. Unfortunately, Norbert Čapek is just one of many Unitarians murdered throughout history because our principles demand that we think freely and disobey or challenge injustice, convention, conformity, and prescription, whether it's in theology, in politics, life, work, or family. Čapek's legacy remains important in a world where the Supreme Court of the United States is deciding if LGBTQIA people can be wantonly fired from their jobs simply for being who they are. Where the government of Uganda is again trying to introduce the death penalty for LGBTQIA people just because of who they are. Both of these examples happening right now, nearly 20 years into the 21st century, are based on the values of a group. These values hide behind Christian theology, but they are actually rooted in humanity's ugliest impulse to dehumanize and destroy another. Values and principles matter. Those values can be rooted in fear and hate, or they can be rooted in inclusion and love. I know where I choose to belong. Our principles and purposes connect us. People of many beliefs and experiences, they are our common ground. They are that threshold to connection. We may not have a whole lot in common, or we think we don't, until we actually connect and talk to one another. And maybe the topic of conversation has to do with whatever those principles sings to you, where your heart is. If your heart is in justice making, then you will find like-minded folks to talk to connect with, to do more. If your whole being resonates with respect for the interdependent web of all existence, using that threshold, you will find other like-minded and like-hearted people with whom to connect. Our shared core is our covenant to affirm and promote these statements and the life they represent in our own lives and in the world. So I like to think of the principles and purposes as an Oreo cookie, with the two cookie parts being our first and seventh principles, and the other 5 principles, the creamy goodness in between. Every time you have an Oreo now, I hope that you will be like, oh yes, inherent worth and dignity, respect for the interdependent web, all that yummy justice stuff in the middle. One cookie, individual worth. Other cookie, awareness of the interdependence. We need both cookies or it's not an Oreo. This is why I'm not really a theologian. I need a coloring book for my book on theology that includes cookies. We need both cookies, the individual and the all, to provide the structure that makes it possible for us to hold the center that lifts up and cares for others. The path of Unitarian Universalism is grounded in covenant, coming together in a shared understanding that creates meaning for our lives and invites us to be co-creators with the sacred in bringing more justice, more joy, more beauty to the world. May we experience true belonging as we learn and love together.